Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our show where we try to show you the truth in which they're trying to hide. I'm here as me, and my co-host is here as well.
Yes, I am also me who is here.
Note the fact that we will not be exposing our names because I think they're out to get me. They could be listening from anywhere, so we're going to try to whisper. Because if we speak loud, they will get us, I think. So, today, this episode, we will be talking about Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton was the chairman of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party. Fred Hampton was in his early 20s when he was killed. And he was very well known for organizing Poor Whites, the Young Lords, a Hispanic and Puerto Rican group, and other local Chicago gangs that would normally not work together at all. They worked together and united for social change. This social change includes successful breakfast programs, health clinics, and even financial classes for the public. But Fred Hampton wasn't only about community service. Fred Hampton considered the U.S. government fascist due to their authoritarian imperialist nature. He often called black neighborhoods occupied territory. This outlined the fact he saw this as a war. Fred Hampton was a revolutionary. He often quoted Mao and people like Ho Chi Minh on successful ways of revolution. He praised some of their techniques to overthrow their local government, and this was very obviously a reason to put a target on his head. He even likened cities like Chicago and Oakland to Babylon, because in the Bible, they fell due to their corruption and imperialism.
Now, because of all this work that Hampton was doing, and he was often the target of local law enforcement, and as such, in 1968, they charged him with stealing 71 ice cream bars to feed to hungry children, and as he was being arrested, he was not handcuffed, and as he got into the back seat of the police cruiser, he noticed that there was a gun in the back seat, and quickly thinking, he turned around and put his hands up, and for the rest of his life, Chairman Fred was certain that this was a setup in order to create a situation where the police would have a pretext in order to kill him. However, this day would come sooner than Fred would have hoped, because on December 4th, 1969, Fred Hampton, a couple days away from being taken to prison for the same ice cream charge, was on the phone with his mother and fell asleep mid-conversation, suspiciously, where he was taken to his bed and laid there sleeping. And later that night, police who were dressed in casual clothes and drove in news vans came in and unannounced began firing into the apartment, where immediately the only armed guard, Mark Clark, a Black Panther, was struck immediately in the chest, and as he fell backwards, the shotgun in his hand fired, and this was the only shot fired that night by any Panther in the building. And continuing on, the police moved in, shooting wildly, and went directly for Fred's bedroom, knowing where it was, pulled his pregnant girlfriend off of him, and while he lay there sleeping, she reports that one officer pulled out his handgun and shot him twice in the head, saying, quote, "He's good and dead now." Afterwards, the police immediately blamed the survivors and took them all into custody for attempted murder, which later this story was changed, where the police admitted that they had fired first, and these charges were dropped suspiciously because they knew that if any of this would enter a court of law, that it would immediately be exposed. And yet this would happen as a ensuing civil rights lawsuit was filed on the behalf of the survivors. And this revealed quickly a conspiracy that permeated all levels of government, in which an FBI agent named Roy Mitchell used an informant named William O'Neill, who was instructed by the FBI to be a member of the Black Panther Party in Chicago in order to get information about them. And O'Neill was instructed to draw a sketch of Hampton's apartment, which was then given to the local prosecutor and used as pretext for a raid, which is what the police called their blatantly illegal attack that night. During this, it was also revealed through blood tests that Fred Hampton had been under the influence of a sedative, which was unusual as Hampton was not known to use drugs, and it is suspected that someone, possibly even O'Neill, had administered this to him. And during this court case, there was massive levels of corruption shown by the court system, with judges acting in biased and blatantly unconstitutional manners. And eventually, this did not lead anywhere and was settled out of court, even through all the evidence about a grander conspiracy that came out during this. And based on the evidence, it's reasonable to assume that all of this conspiracy was linked to a broader government program called COINTELPRO.
So COINTELPRO was a project run by the government. It was a series of illegal projects that targeted political opponents and aimed to suppress them. Such groups targeted were the feminists, anti-Vietnam protesters, both organizations and even individual students, environmentalists, American Indian Movement, United Farm Workers, Puerto Rican independence fighters. Even the KKK was said to be targeted, but very rarely did they actually intervene. And even individual reporters could be targeted by this program. Whilst it does not run still, similar things could be still running. They could target people like us. So, be grateful that we're here, because we may not always be here forever. But no, it was blatantly illegal. The church committee showed this, and it exposed that the government did just abuse its power to suppress its political enemies. So they used such methods such as infiltration, like William O'Neill, psychological warfare, legal system abuse, like we saw in these cases, illegal force, like breaking into the apartment, media control, such as spreading propaganda that showed the Black Panthers as just a violent organization and party in local newspapers, and surveillance, such as that done to Martin Luther King, even sending him a letter to tell him to kill himself. Another letter like this was sent in Chicago to divide the groups in which Hampton worked to unite. Letters like these were very common and was one way we could get rid of and divide groups from uniting in the working class. So J. Edgar Hoover himself said that they need to prevent the rise of a Black Messiah. Chairman Fred was a great example of such a Black Messiah. He was radical. He united all the working class under the Rainbow Coalition, which was a group made up by all of the people previously mentioned. And he was very charismatic. He inspired people. He inspired people to be revolutionaries. This was a very, very dangerous trait he had. And it was, not a surprise that he was targeted for this.
Now, the question arose, what if this hadn't happened? Because there are many ways in which Hampton could have survived this raid, because normally Panthers were very good at evading and defending against police violence, and it was only due to efforts such as those by William O'Neill and other informants that made the defense and security of the Chicago chapter so weak. And it's entirely possible that in an alternate scenario there could have been other armed guards, or Mark Clark could have not been killed immediately, or other people in the apartment could have taken up arms, or many other different situations in which any amount of better security could have possibly led to a situation where the Panthers were able to fight back and even kill all the police officers that entered the apartment illegally. And in this situation, they would have immediately surrendered, knowing that their lives would be in danger, and Hampton could have easily survived this, being dragged out by any survivors of such shootout.
So this begs the question, what would have happened if Fred Hampton survived? Fred Hampton was still going to go to prison on these false ice cream charges. And he did say he wanted to go to prison, because he could have fled to Cuba, but he decided he wanted to go to prison to unite the gangs inside. If he did this, there's a chance that, these members could come out and they could continue uniting the working class of Chicago. But it's very unlikely this would have led to a larger working class revolution, because this one man and his actions in prison would not be enough to change this.
Now, in this situation, the conspiracy still would have been uncovered, because the civil rights case could have easily been implemented, because it had nothing to do with the killing itself, but rather the illegal actions of police officers, and the connections to COINTELPRO and the conspiracy in general still would have been known. And yet this may not have made much change, because originally, when we carried out on this endeavor, we thought that maybe if Fred Hampton had survived, that things could have gone differently, because he was such a revolutionary and had such great ideas. But we quickly realized that no, that would not cause change, because COINTELPRO is an example of how the corruption and overreach of government power ran so deep, incredibly from the top to the bottom, that not a single man alone could make such change. And whether or not he actually died made no difference whatsoever, because the problem ran deeper into the systems embedded in the government than just one man.
So, the assassination of Fred Hampton alone was not extremely significant, but it does outline COINTELPRO and how that is an example of the government abuse of power. COINTELPRO was very successful at stopping many political opponents, suppressing their voices in any possible change they could enact. This shows the government will legally suppress reformists and like the feminists and revolutionaries like Fred Hampton alike. The only way to make reform must be by stopping the government from suppressing change. They have so much power that revolution must be the only viable way to make change.
Now, you may say that this shows that revolution is not the answer, because a revolutionary, like Chairman Fred, can be taken out as well. But Fred, he was just one man in one city, and that is something that's easy for such a powerful system to stop. But if this movement, this working class revolution for change, were to be broader, stretched to a national or even international level, then it would be able to make real change. And the example of Fred Hampton is not proof that a revolution would not be the answer.
A united working class revolution supported by either the international or national masses is the only way we would have the power to do this. It takes many individuals to make changes. So we urge you, get active, get revolutionary, take to the streets.
Redacted.